All right, so I also promised some videos on how to do these different constructions. I also promised I'd upload a hard copy of the directions. So what we're going to do is work through some of these constructions. I might make these separate videos or just leave them all together. We'll see how long they are if it's just one long video. So the instructions I've uploaded look like this. Geometry constructions, and they're straight from, they haven't changed. They say 2009, but these really haven't changed for a few millennia. So in order to follow these instructions, let's see what we have. Our first one, construct a segment CD congruent to segment AB. They show these two figures. So let's see what these actually tell us we have to do. So I have my segment AB. I want to build something congruent to this, meaning it has to have the same length. The first thing I need is I need a place to put that. So I'm going to put that C right here. And I need to construct an array based off C. So I'm going to take C. I'm going to add this ray coming off of it. That's longer than what I know I need. That's some ray. Okay. I'm not too worried about another letter for this because we're going to put a D on here once we have a congruent line segment. To do that, we're going to use our compass. Don't need a ruler. A ruler won't really work for it, not with what we're going to do. I open my compass to be the same measurement as the line segment. We see that appears to be how large my line segment is. So now I bring it down, lay it on C, and holding my compass point, I just make a short arc. I call this point D at the intersection. And since this distance was the same as this distance, I know I have segment CD is congruent to segment AB. So let's go ahead and move on to our next construction. This video is pretty short so far. So we come back. Our next construction was construct a perpendicular bisector of segment AB. So we're going to need a new line segment, this time AB, and we're going to make a perpendicular bisector. Since there's a bisector, it's going to cut it in half, and that's how we're going to do it. We're going to open our compass to reach more than halfway to B. We'll draw an arc. With that same measurement, we'll draw an arc coming from B. Then where those arcs intersect, we'll connect our line, giving us our perpendicular bisector, and we'll mark it with our box to show it's perpendicular. So let's try this. As I said, our first step is we need our line segment from A to B. We take our compass, open it so it reaches at least a little bit more than halfway, which this one does. And we take it, put our point A, and we can strike an arc that goes from the bottom all the way to the top. Alternatively, we could have struck simply one arc at the bottom and then one arc at the top. We did not have to go the entire way. Now we take our compass and making sure it's still the same. It still has to be the same distance. It can't have changed, so I'm going to check. Okay, it's still the same distance. I can see it's the same distance. Except now I place the point on B, strike an arc through the top, bring it down to the bottom, strike an arc through the bottom. Now I need my straight edge. So I'm going to use the edge of my protractor. I connect where I have my 2 points. And this is a perpendicular bisector. And in fact, I could measure the centimeter marks, and let's see what we see. Here are centimeters from A to here. We see we have 3.5, 3.6, but not quite to 3.7. So let's come over and move it to the bisector. So we have our line going through bisector. And point B is a little hard to see where it ends. So we're going to add just a little bit so we can see it. Okay. We come forward 3. Let's center this. We come out to the 0.5 mark. Here's our 0.5. And 0.6. And it looks like we have just a little bit. So using just that compass and straight edge, we were able to get to within not 1 centimeter, but within less than 1/10 of a centimeter just from using our compass. Okay. That's how we construct a perpendicular bisector. Let's come down a bit more. So what if I want to construct a perpendicular to a line from point P not on the line? So this is a little bit different. I'm not trying to bisect a line segment anymore. Instead, what I'm doing is I have a line and I want to make another line perpendicular to it from some particular point called P, just not on that line. And it tells me I've got a few arcs I have to draw. Then I have to draw an intersection from those arcs and then connect it. So let's go ahead and see what that would look like. So we have our piece of paper. Okay. Now, here's where all of this works from. The compass, every point that we draw with this compass is the same distance from the center. So, and I make this small enough that I'm reaching from point P out to the line. Okay. I know wherever it crosses this line, it's the same distance as this line. These points are the same distance from P. And if we think back to what we did, we've just made a perpendicular bisector. This point was the same distance from A as it was from B because we kept our compass the same size. Similarly, they were the same distance from this point. So we struck those arcs just now from P to this point and P to this point. I want, like we did for a perpendicular bisector, now I need a point at the bottom that's the same distance from there. So I draw my arc, keeping my compass the same size. Come over to my point of intersection, and I construct my arc. And now I know from what we did, I use my straight edge and connect point P to my point of intersection of the two arcs. And I draw my line going through it. And now I know that I have a line that's perpendicular to my original line. In fact, even, we can try this. We'll see if the line was large enough. Okay, it appears I need to extend it a little bit. So we'll extend it in the downward. Because the line is straight, it'll be okay. Let's extend our line downward. Remember, when we measure an angle, if it's perpendicular here, it should be perpendicular here. We said we line up our points, and as we notice, I've lined up my base, and now my angle coming through the protractor, and as we can see, it's going right through the 90 degree. It's a right angle, and right angles are perpendicular. So we made it. And I could call this PQ. And I can say PQ, it's a line, is perpendicular, and I would need to name this line, let's call it RS, is perpendicular to line RS. This is another way I could say it, they're perpendicular. However, we want to include this box since we know that's a right angle. Let's see how long we're at so far. Okay, so far the video is, let's see, 9 minutes long. So let's get this last one on perpendicular points and lines. We'll be a little bit over 10 minutes, looks like. So it's constructing a perpendicular to a line from point P on the line. We see we have point P on a line. We're going to draw an arc on each side of P. It looks like they're the same distance apart. Then we're going to draw an arc from those 2 points to above the point, and they're going to be the same distance apart. And then we'll connect where they intersect through point P. So let's come back over to our piece of paper. So we have point P. And this time on our compass, it's not quite very large. We're going to keep it kind of small this time, because as you see, I have point P is kind of close to the edge of the line. So I'm going to measure it out. That definitely looks large enough. I can use that. So you say we put our compass point on P. We strike an arc. Okay. Remember, the key here is gentle. I'm going to rotate our compass and set it back down on point P. And strike an arc. By the way, this is one of those times that if you really want to, holding it gently, so we're holding it really on the point and letting the pencil just rest, we could rotate our paper. And we see by our circle that we didn't change our compass size as we did this. We could have struck the arc through the entire top. It would have been fine. But now we put our point on one point of intersection. And what we have to do is we need to make sure we go more than halfway to the other side. So we have to make our compass a little bigger. We're exactly halfway, and that won't work. So we have to make our compass a little bit bigger. Okay. We're going to strike our arc up here at the top. Now, leaving our compass this size, we're going to move it to the opposite side of the circle, and we're going to strike our arc. It might have been a little difficult to see that. My hand was in the way. I struck my arc. You notice I'm not even holding the pencil side. I'm only holding the side that has the point. I just need to let the pencil drag along the paper, and it'll leave a little bit of a mark. And what we're doing is this point is the same distance from this point as it is from the other side. Just like P is the same distance from this point as it is from this point. All of the points on my bisector are the same distance from these two lines. So I take my straight edge, I align it so that it goes through P, and it goes through their points intersect. I draw my line, and I was a little off this time. I'm a little off to the side of P, but that's okay. But this is my perpendicular bisector. So I've drawn it's not a perpendicular bisector. This is a line perpendicular to another line going through point P on that first line. I'm sorry, I called it a bisector. It's not a bisector. A line goes on forever. I can't cut it in half. It just goes on forever. These are our constructions for perpendicular bisectors and perpendicular lines to another line. And what we'll do in the second video is we're going to move on to our angles.